Good evening. I'm Haylee Ficuciello, Senior Correspondent for Englebrook Independent News. Welcome to this week's Federal Crime Report, where we examine significant criminal cases prosecuted in the federal courts throughout the Great Plains and South Central region of the United States. Tonight's report includes major narcotic trafficking prosecutions, firearm offenses, immigration enforcement action, child exploitation cases, healthcare fraud, and several large-scale investigations conducted by federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies working all together. As always, our reporting is based on official announcements released by the United States Attorney's Office and federal court records. When we discuss indictments or newly filed criminal charges, it's important to remember that those charges are all allegations only. Every defendant is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty in the court of law. We begin tonight in Montana. Federal prosecutors in Montana announced several significant developments during the first week of July. A Red Lodge man received more than 18 years in federal prison after admitting to trafficking large quantities of methamphetamine into Montana and unlawfully possessing a firearm as a convicted felon. Investigators said the case resulted from a lengthy drug trafficking investigation involving Eastern Montana High-Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Task Force. Authorities seized approximately 20 pounds of methamphetamine during the investigation, along with cash, drug records, and handguns. In Great Falls, 2 Mexican nationals were sentenced after pleading guilty to illegally re-entering the United States and possessing fraudulent immigration documents. Following sentencing, both men were remanded to the custody of the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement for removal proceedings. Meanwhile, in Missoula, an Indiana man pled guilty to federal charges involving traveling with the intent to engage in illicit sexual conduct and transportation of child sexual abuse material. Sentencing is scheduled for November. Federal prosecutors allege the investigation began after an online communication with the Montana teenager. Because the sentencing has not been occurred, the defendant remains presumed innocent regarding any allegations beyond those admitted through his guilty plea until final judgment is entered by the court. Next, we move to the Dakotas and Wyoming. In South Dakota, a Mission man has been sentenced to just over 1 year in federal prison after failing to comply with federal sex offender registration requirements following a previous conviction. Also in Mission, 2 20-year-old defendants were sentenced after pleading guilty in connection with the theft of a pickup truck from the Rosebud, Sussex Indian Reservation. Both received time served, supervised release, restitution, and special assessment. In Sussex Falls, a Yakuton man received 45 years in federal prison sentence after pleading guilty to producing child sexual abuse materials involving multiple juvenile victims over several years. Federal prosecutors said the investigation began after a cyber tip identified online exploitation. In neighboring Wyoming, a Florida mother and daughter were sentenced for their roles in a healthcare fraud conspiracy involving fraudulent Medicaid billing through an autism treatment clinic operating in Wyoming and North Dakota. The court ordered substantial restitution to Medicaid and Tri-Caid programs, continuing to Nebraska, Colorado, and Kansas. In Nebraska, a Waverly man received more than 11 years in federal prison after being convicted for transporting and possessing child sexual abuse material following an investigation by the Homeland Security Investigations. Another Nebraska case resulted in a 14-year prison sentence of an Omaha man convicted of methamphetamine distribution and possession of a firearm despite prior felony convictions. Federal prosecutors also announced a lengthy prison sentence of 2 individuals convicted of trafficking 2 minor victims for commercial sex. Investigators credited a joint Omaha Police Department and Homeland Security Investigation Human Trafficking Task Force with recovering the victims. In Colorado, a federal grand jury indicted 2 Pueblo men on charges including bank robbery, carjacking, and firearm offenses stemming from an alleged March crime spree. Those charges are allegations only, and both defendants are presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty in the federal court. Kansas prosecutors also announced guilty pleas in 2 separate cases involving threats made on social media towards public officials and federal law enforcement personnel. In another Kansas case, a former registered nurse admitted forging prescriptions to illegally obtain narcotic medication. Federal officials say she also permanently lost her ability to work in federally funded healthcare facilities. Authorities also announced the conclusion of a long-running Homeland Security Task Force investigation that dismantled a cocaine trafficking organization linked to Mexico. 15 defendants have now received federal prison sentence following the multi-year investigation. Now to Oklahoma and Texas. Federal immigration enforcement remained active across Oklahoma. The United States Attorney's Office announced that 23 individuals were charged over a 2-month period with illegal re-entry to the United States after prior deportation. Several defendants have previously been removed multiple times. Federal prosecutors emphasize that every defendant charged in those cases is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. In Texas, a Fort Worth man received a 40-year federal prison sentence after authorities seized more than 244 kilograms of methamphetamine along with heroin, cocaine, and firearms during a narcotic investigation. Also in Northern District of Texas, a former Texas Tech University professor pled guilty to leading a fentanyl trafficking conspiracy. According to court records, investigators allege he used professional knowledge in supply chain management to assist in the distribution network. Sentencing will occur at a later date. In Amarillo, a former school athletic coach was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison after he was convicted of enticing a minor. The sentence also includes a lengthy supervised release and lifetime sex offender registration requirements. Finally, we conclude with a national roundup. Federal prosecutors also announced additional major developments outside the region. 2 New Jersey men were sentenced for their role in a drug trafficking organization responsible for importing fentanyl analog from China into the United States before distributing counterfeit pills throughout northern New Jersey. Prosecutors said multiple members of the organization have now received lengthy federal prison sentencing, while additional sentencing remain pending. Meanwhile, in Southern District of New York, federal authorities announced the extradition of former Afghan general and former deputy speaker of Afghanistan's parliament to face federal narcotic trafficking and firearm conspiracy charges. According to the criminal complaint, prosecutors allege the defendant negotiated shipments of heroin and methamphetamine intended for importation into the United States while also offering military-grade weapons. Those allegations have not been proven in court, and the defendant is presumed innocent unless proven guilty in the court of law. Those are some of the major federal criminal cases announced during the beginning of July of 2026 across the Great Plains and South Central federal judicial districts. Our reporting is based on official release from the United States Department of Justice, the United States Attorney's Office, and federal court records. The charges discussed in these broadcasts have not yet resulted in convictions and are merely allegations. Every defendant is presumed innocent unless and until proven beyond reasonable doubt in the court of law. For continued coverage of federal law enforcement, the federal court systems, and major criminal investigation across America, stay with Englebrook Independent News. I'm Haylee Ficuciello. Thank you for watching and have a safe evening.